Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Shepard, Los Angeles luxury real estate broker, and today I want to talk to you about pocket listings. I want to tell you why pocket listings can be good, why they may not be good, and basically what are pocket listings. So if you don't already know what a pocket listing is, it's interchangeable with the term off market. It basically means that an agent has a listing or has some sort of agreement signed with a seller that allows them to sell the property and collect a commission without marketing it to the general public. And when I mean that, I mean they don't put it on the MLS, they don't put it on Zillow, they don't put it on the Redfins, they don't put it out for the entire general public to see. They try to sell it by talking to other agents, sending out email blasts, maybe even holding open houses. A lot of times there's not even a sign on the property. All agents do it in a different way, but the main thing is that this property doesn't go on the MLS, the multiple listing service in Los Angeles, that's what we call it, and it doesn't get syndicated out to other real estate websites like Zillow or Redfin. So there's a couple reasons why these actually are really not good for the industry. In fact, our local MLS board and the California Association of Realtors recently, within the past couple of years, started penalizing brokers who were not putting their properties on the MLS immediately if they were already marketing it. So we still aren't allowed to market the property to anyone, agents or potential buyers, unless it is in the MLS. And the reason for this is a couple reasons. One, by leaving it off of the MLS, you're not exposing it to the full marketplace. So let's say there's a lot of buyers who are looking online for a property, and that's mainly how they're finding the potential property for them to purchase. If it's not in the MLS, how are they going to see that? And if they don't see it, one, that means that buyer is missing out on that property. It also means that the seller is missing out on that potential buyer. Sure, that seller may still be able to sell their property, but that one buyer who didn't get to see it because it wasn't online may have wanted to pay 5% more, or was willing to pay more than whatever that other buyer was willing to pay for the property. So generally the argument is that price is always the most important thing to a seller, and you're missing out on buyers who may want to pay more for that particular property by not exposing it to the full marketplace. My argument against this is that actually price isn't everything. I have a lot of sellers, who basically are comfortable with like, okay, I want $1.3 million for this. And you know what? I really want it to go to, a first-time home buyer, or I want it to go to somebody that I like, which actually is a whole other conversation because that can be considered a violation of fair housing law. But the reality is price isn't actually the most important thing to every single seller. Sometimes it's other terms. And if they get those other terms along with their, minimum price, it shouldn't be, if they're able to get that from the property being off market, that shouldn't be an issue, right? They believe strongly that it's against fair housing policy. So, if a property isn't available to everyone, maybe it's only available to a couple brokers, and those brokers don't tend to work with first-time home buyers, or maybe buyers from a lower income area that's trying to move into a higher income area. Basically it can be considered discrimination because now you're not including marketing to that lower income area or that lower income buyer, and it can be considered discrimination. The second thing is that a lot of brokers, and I don't see this so much in Los Angeles, and we'll get into why I feel that pocket listings actually are a very good thing. I'll explain why in Los Angeles, I think it works really well. But basically, the school of thought is that with pocket listings, brokers aren't trying to do the best by their seller. Instead, what they're trying to do is quite literally keep that listing in their pocket and only market it to their own potential buyers, or just trying to solicit their own buyer for it. So naturally, listing agents, people who are representing a seller in the property, also work with agents who are representing buyers and buyers who may want to purchase that potential property. But this agent wants to be able to make both sides of the commission, so they want to find their own personal buyer for it. And therefore that leaves out a lot of potential buyers for the property, ones that could be writing an offer on the property or would love to write an offer on the property but cannot, because now this agent is just keeping it for himself and trying to get his own buyer into the property. They also believe that a lot of times agents are trying to sell it at a discount to find their own buyers and therefore doing their seller an injustice. So those are kind of the main reasons why people feel that pocket listings can be bad. One, it doesn't expose it to the whole marketplace because you're not putting it into the MLS. Two, it tends to be a fair housing issue. And three, agents generally are sneaky, and I don't believe this, but they think that agents will be sneaky and do their seller a disservice by just trying to get their own buyer in. Pocket listings can be good, and I feel this might actually be very specific to Los Angeles or the luxury markets. I would love to know if you guys also feel that it would be beneficial in your marketplace. But in my experience, there are a few situations where it's actually good for the seller to keep their property off market or as a pocket listing. And here's why. One, there are certain situations where a seller actually does need privacy. So perhaps it's a celebrity, very high celebrity. They don't want to put their property all over the MLS. Or maybe there's certain features of the home that they don't want shown in marketing or whatever it may be. And generally, if you have a $20 million property, there's already very few brokers who are working with buyers that can purchase a property of that caliber. And generally, those buyers know where to go to find that property. It's also not a situation where, this property is going to have 10 offers on it. Buyers generally aren't competing against other buyers. They're only competing against themselves. So for a property of this caliber generally, there's really no lost money there. If a buyer's just competing against himself, he's just negotiating with the seller. If he were competing against other buyers, then yes, I could see where there could be lost money there. But overall, I would say at the luxury level, having a pocket listing, potentially not getting one specific buyer versus another is not going to make a huge difference. Secondly, sometimes you just need to test the marketplace. So it does happen where sellers tend to be a little bit unrealistic with their pricing and they're adamant about it. An off-market or a pocket listing kind of allows a seller to market it, get interested buyers, and get feedback about the price. Once they do that, then they can determine when they actually go on the market if it's a viable price or not, if it'll sell at that price. And generally, this is better than just putting it on the market and doing price drops, because every agent will tell you this, that price drops tend to keep your property listed for longer, because if a property is overpriced, buyers just don't tend to look at it, or they don't take any action on it because there's other properties that are better in the marketplace for a better price. And so, the property becomes tainted if there's a long days on market, right? So if a property normally sells in 30 days, that's priced correctly. If you overprice it from the beginning, now it's on the market for 60 days. And once it's on the market for 60 days, after a couple price drops, people say, well, what's wrong with this property? Buyer psychology, they don't automatically know that, oh, it was overpriced from the beginning. Or even if they do know that, now it's not new and exciting, so they don't want to look at it. And any realtor will tell you that. That's not just my opinion or subjective. That is how marketing works for real estate. And the very last thing is that there are some properties, especially in Los Angeles, that tend to be best suited for an investor buyer. Buyers today in the Los Angeles market are generally looking for properties that are fixed up or at least livable. There are a lot of properties that come on the market today that haven't been fixed up in 40 years, or the carpets are pea stained from pets, or they're just not a property that an end user, meaning someone that would walk into the property and just say, oh yeah, sure, I'll live in this, I'll just fix it up. Someone who wants to live in it, I should say. An end user is someone who wants to live in it. So those types of properties are generally better suited for an investor or developer. And investors and developers don't want to compete with the general marketplace. This has become a little bit more, developers and investors, it's become so competitive now that they're more open to buying stuff on the MLS. But in general, if a property is listed off market, they're more than willing to pay market value for it, and sometimes even slightly over market value for it. They like the exclusivity of it being off market and that there's no prior history to them, you know, when they finish the project, rehab it or whatever they do, build a new construction home, and they put it on the market in the future once it's complete. They like that there's no history to it, you know, previous sale records on Redfin or Zillow. So investors or developers generally tend to lean towards those types of properties if they're off market. And the other reality is this: one investor generally can't pay more than another investor. They all pretty much can pay the same value because it's all about profit margins. So, you know, yeah, sure, a developer wants to get a 30%, 40% profit margin on a property, but in this day and age, there's so few and far between that a lot of them are settling for 10 or 15% profit margins. And, you know, an investor developer isn't going to buy a property at a 3% profit margin, therefore, you know, allowing them to pay more for your property. There's a minimum or a maximum, I guess, that they're willing to pay because there's a minimum profit margin that they're willing to accept. So again, it's not like exposing that to the full marketplace is going to bring in a bunch of buyers and have them all compete against each other. There's generally a ceiling when it's being sold to an investor buyer. So yeah, those are kind of the reasons why pocket listings are good and bad. In my personal opinion, I do feel that it is a niche that can be beneficial in our Los Angeles luxury market, but I do understand the disadvantages as well. So feel free to also watch my other videos. I'm going to have more coming. My next video is going to be about building a home in Los Angeles, you know, finding a property to tear down or vacant land and building your own custom home and how that process works, because it can be very confusing and hard to determine which properties there are to look at or which ones are feasible to build on. So watch for that next video. Ask any questions in the comments. I totally want to hear your responses and your questions in your comments, and I want to respond to them. So thanks so much. Look out for my next videos and talk to you soon.